Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Kong. I'm the festival director for Happy Fest. Thank you so much for joining us on our 10th day of the festival. I hope you enjoyed all of tonight's films. And as a friendly reminder, we have pre-recorded Q&As with the director Leo Gawa for To Be Visible and director Lizette Flannery for Tokyo Hula. So please check out those interviews on our YouTube channel, OCA Greater Houston. As a reminder also, tonight's Q&A is being broadcast live on YouTube and Facebook. So please feel free to leave questions in the comment section and we'll do our best to address them during today's interview. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the writer, director, co-producer of Idol, Ryushi Lindsay, all the way from Japan.
Hello.
Hi, Ryushi.
Hello. Thank you for having me here. It's a real honor and a privilege, always.
No, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to share your story with our Houston and U.S. audiences. Diving right in, what inspired you to write this story?
So, at the time, so I wrote it. I wrote this script a good while ago now. I'm realizing like how time flies over the years. It's crazy. I think I wrote it in 2018. I think it was shot in 2018. I'm losing track of the years, but I'd read an article in like I think it's like an Associated Press article about the child idol scene in Tokyo, and that sort of struck a chord with me as something that's like strange and bizarre and crazy. And like I sort of was aware of the idol industry. Obviously, you sort of can't miss it if you live in Japan, but I was sort of reading about all these kids who perform for like audiences of middle-aged salarymen, and I was thinking that's just such a weird phenomenon. And I think it just started from there. And I was at the same time, I think I'd also recently read an article about like a famous abduction, like a horrific real life abduction case, and sort of the two blended together quite naturally, and I sort of ended up where I ended up.
Kind of writing the script for Idol.
Yeah, exactly. I think I was looking for, I sort of had the idea of the idols, and I was like, okay, what is some drama, what is some tension, what is some conflict that we can bring into that story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely something that resonates, because I kind of, I love following kind of Japanese culture as well. And so that was one thing that stood out was the popularity of idol groups and their fascination with them. Do you think that the like socioeconomic and financial pressures that you had mentioned about families face in order to remain at the top of this industry, um, is that kind of more severe in Japan versus other countries? Because I know we have like child actors in the US and like other countries, but it just seems like it's a kind of a different vibe in Japan.
I wonder. Obviously, this film is fiction, and I didn't do sort of any proper like journalistic research into the specific socioeconomic backgrounds and like data, and I don't have numbers that I can pull from, but it's not untrue. It's not untrue that Japan has like a very big class gap, and it's not untrue that Japan, I think, has the highest number of working poor in the OECD, which means and there's like not a very strong social safety net, which then can potentially, yes, lead to greater socioeconomic and financial pressures. Whether how that relates specifically to the idol industry, I don't have, I can't comment. I do think, like you said, there are parallels to be drawn with the States and with other countries in the world, with child actors, and I've read stories about families in, I think, the US and the UK who would sort of mortgage their homes to fund their child, their kids' acting career, in the hope that they would become a star. And I think also sports as well. I've read similar stories about people who kids who are aspiring athletes, and families have had to go into massive debt to fund those careers, and then it hasn't panned out. So I think it's a global symptom of capitalism, and I don't think it's necessarily specifically so unique to Japan.
Right. And then kind of blending in the reality to fantasy, you had to hire young actresses for the film. Did you get any feedback from the parents as far as like what they thought of the plot line, and did the actresses kind of fully understand the premise of the film with them being so young? Because I know even with age, you still have like a level of maturity within these that age group. So I just wonder how
Well, it's
much they kind of
interesting.
internalized.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's interesting talking to the kids, especially in the auditions. I was asking sort of what they were into and what things they like to watch, and a lot of them were like, "Oh, I like to watch this medical drama and this, medical drama, this like harrowing show with people dying left, right, and center." And I was like, "Oh, wow, okay, that's interesting." Like they're all very like a lot. Yeah, so we were working with, I think, like 8, 9, 10-year-olds, and they were all pretty mature and seemed to be sort of fairly wise to the world. The feedback I had was mainly just like how much they enjoyed it, being on set and the whole shoot, and we had like such a fantastic relationship with them, and they were all really incredibly talented um, and like really just like great personalities to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you find your cast?
We had a brilliant casting director actually who I met through a friend, and he had like really good relationships with various talent agencies, and he sort of did the bulk of the work, and then we ran auditions, and that was the process. So he knew Sasaki Mia, who plays Kasumi, the daughter of the protagonist, yeah, and he knew her management, and introduced us, and things like that. So yeah, really, really thank you to our great casting director, Ono-san.
Yeah, I think each character really brought like a real rawness and a realness to each role that was played. So I really enjoyed the casting for this.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. No, it's a real privilege to work with such talented and also like recognizable, certainly in Japan, recognizable talent. On my first short that I was making here, it was like a real privilege, and I think I am grateful for the trust that also the cast and their management showed in me.
That's awesome. I want to dive into kind of the more production side. So there was really interesting cinematic angles that you took liberties with in the film. That being kind of like that wider exterior shot with the dialogue purely moving the scene versus like a close-up of the actual actors within that scene. Can you explain your reasoning for that?
I can tell you my retroactive reasoning for it, and I can tell you the on the ground, the realities of production. I mean, certainly I throughout the film, throughout the shoot, I was like very, and throughout all our prep, I was very much focused on the idea of not shooting too many close-ups. I wanted things to be a bit wider and to let the frame breathe and let the audience's eye wander, so they can effectively be sort of their own editor and choose where to look and where to find the story. I'm a bit of a film studies nerd. I majored in film studies, so I sort of I really like Andre Bazin's essay "What is Cinema," and so I sort of drew from that and drew from the European art house tradition and the European social realism tradition. So that sort of heavily influenced our wider frames. And then there's like some stuff where the realities of making, making short films and budgets. So like you're limited in your options. But I think I'm actually really happy with how we shot, particularly like the scene in the diner near the end where it's just a single exterior.
No, I like that because ultimately the audience is a bystander, so I think that really kind of plays into that role. Like as a bystander, you just enter a scene and you may catch something that's, pivotal, that's in relation to the storyline, or you just may catch the general feel of the location. So, whether conscious or not, I think it was a great decision.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. I didn't want to be too manipulative. And when we were editing, we actually tried putting in some temp tracks for the score and to see how it worked, and it just felt like it was too much. Mm-hmm. And I did want to, rather than like, push the audience to feel a certain way, I wanted them to sort of decide how to feel and where to look and so on.
Yeah. And then speaking of, feeling, a lot of that also comes with like lighting, quote unquote mood lighting. And so what I liked is that you kind of used like a lot of color backlighting in a lot of the frames, particularly with the scenes that involve the mother, Miyabi. Was that intentional as well, or was that just kind of something that felt right as you were going along through the film process?
We were very careful in our lighting choices, and we planned everything very carefully. And we did quite a lot of research. So, we're out and looking at sort of our environments in Tokyo, and there's all the scenes in the sister's apartment where there's that sort of strong green cast. We were very much drawing on a lot of the lighting that people, a lot of the fluorescent lighting that I think you see in a lot of Asia, where you get that green spike from the fluorescent light that gets picked up on the camera. And then in the bits in the sort of backstage bits in the Idol Theatre, where we've got some sort of colourful, party gels. Well, I can't remember what the lighting setup was, but we've got some purple and pinks, and that was sort of, we wanted it to be, colourful and extravagant, but also a bit sickly and uncomfortable.
Yeah. No, that definitely came across. Because you definitely get that kind of like chilling, foreboding feeling with like the green kind of eerie lighting. So that's really cool. You mentioned budget in one of the earlier parts of the answers. What were some of the other challenges that you faced making the film?
So they say not to work with kids or animals. We had a brilliant time working with the kids. They were all amazing professionals, so talented. Knew the line, nailed every mark. Incredible talent. The sole challenge with that was that they're working as obviously, and rightfully so, limited legally. They can only work a certain number of hours a day. So there was a logistical challenge in our scheduling. But on the whole, like, things were very smooth. We didn't have any disasters. We were slightly worried. I think on our first day, we got to the location and discovered like they were like trimming all the hedges in the neighborhood. and like I was just having I was having a freak out. Our sound recordist was having a freak out, and we're like, what the fuck are we gonna do? Am I allowed to swear? Excuse me for swearing. What are we gonna do? And then magically, just as we were getting ready to shoot the first take, it all stopped. They went away. They'd finished their work. It was. We had like a few moments like that where just the stars aligned, and we were very, very fortunate.
Oh, that's good. Yes, I've been on many a Zoom calls where, I don't do anything throughout the throughout the day, and then that one Zoom call for 1 hour, and suddenly the lawn people show up. So I totally
Yeah.
feel you on that. Uh, Diving into kind of, your personal background, growing up British East Asian, you've had many identities to pull from, to pull inspiration from. How has your cultural background influenced your work?
It's a really good question. So I moved to Japan straight up. So just for context, I grew up in the UK. I was born in the UK, grew up in the UK. My mum is Japanese, and my dad is a white British man. Um, and then I spent like summer holidays here quite regularly. So Japan always felt like a second home, but I only moved to live here properly in 2017, sorry, after graduating from university. Um, and I think for quite a while, I was sort of as a writer, struggling to sort of find an in and find a way to tell stories that are set in Japan. I was sort of in this awkward stage where like I felt like I wasn't familiar enough with life in Japan, and at the same time I was in this awkward stage where it wasn't like fresh and it wasn't like an unknown land. So I could neither tell the stories with like the um the legitimacy of someone who lived here, and nor with the eye through the eyes of an outsider. So I was sort of stuck in this space. But I think after a certain amount of time, that angst went away, and I feel very at home here, just as at home as I do in the UK. And now, funnily, I can't sort of picture telling stories that are set in Britain. So we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how much your environment really shapes the way that you view things. And so it's really cool when it can actually be reflected into your career, your pieces of work, your projects that you're working on. Um, Going into this year's festival theme about raising communities, your film block was raising artists. What advice do you have for aspiring artists that wish to pursue filmmaking?
Uh, don't do it. It's a world of pain. Um, I think okay, I can like the thing is that the film. I'm going to be really cynical here. Film is unfortunately, and this is not how it should be, but it is not a meritocracy, and there's too much of it is who you know, um and equally like chance encounters can have a very very big impact. Um, and so with Idol, for example, I met our executive producer Chris Combs uh, in a bar in Tokyo, and just got talking, and it went from there. But like that's just such a chance encounter, um, and he put up the majority of the budget. And if I hadn't had that meeting, then I probably wouldn't have made the film. And then the Idol led into like so much work for me over the ensuing years. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like get yourself in a position where you're ready for that chance encounter. So do your homework and make sure like you have like the basics, you have the skills, and you can talk about your story, and you know how to tell a story, and you know how to make films, and um so that when that opportunity comes along, you can take it. Um, and then the other thing I guess I'd like to say is I, as well as fiction, I make experimental documentary films, and that is sort of both out of personal interest, but also like out of necessity. I think if you are the average person doesn't have access to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to make a film. And so you have to find fresh ways of telling stories, I think. Because if you're trying to use the language of films that cost tens, hundreds, millions of dollars, to make, then you have such limited chances to stand out. That I think you have to do something different. You have to find different ways of telling those stories, and that's why I make documentaries. And for me, sort of the form is part of the message, and is essential that my documentary work is sort of anti, and is sort of in a language that is in opposition or in conversation with, different to that of dominant cinema. Mm-hmm. And that's something that where you sort of lean into and embrace your your limited resources.
Right. Do you, excluding the budgetary factor, and that, the documentaries are, far beyond cheaper than the main narratives. Mm-hmm. Do you actually have a favorite? Like, do you favor documentaries over narratives, or vice versa?
I love both. I think, narrative does, fulfills, satisfies me more emotionally, and I think documentary, I'm really into sort of new wave, documentary from around the world, a lot of sort of 60s, 70s stuff, particularly from Germany and from Japan. And that sort of satisfies, I guess, like my intellectual side. I love both.
That's cool. So there were so many takeaways from Idol, even though it was such a short film. What do you hope others take away from the film? Like, what's the message that you'll
that? I mean, that's up. I think that's up to the viewer to decide what they take away from it. And I'm curious how what people do take away from it. But for me, it's the story of a mum and her daughter. It's about the relationships. Mm-hmm. Maybe. I change my mind about this every time someone asks me.
No, that's perfectly.
Obviously,
right.
I could, I can talk about politics and economics and class, but I think that you can just watch the film. Like, I don't think I can add anything particularly.
Yeah, I mean, that's the root of it, right? You always have to have some type of relationship or bonding within the film. That's kind of the core piece, and then whatever happens organically beyond that, if her mom happens to murder a potential rival, things happen. It's a slice of life film, but everything comes with that core relationship. So I like that. It to leave it ambiguous is a perfect kind of way to approach any film, I guess. I saw a note that you might be making a feature length, or you're working on making a feature length version of Idol. Can you share what upcoming projects you're currently working on?
Yeah, so I've been writing a feature, have written a feature length version of Idol. And then, so over the next couple of years, I want to try and find a way of making that. Trying to get my next short set up to shoot in the late summer, early autumn. It's based on a true story, very sort of loosely inspired by a true story. Again, but it's based on a story my grandmother told me. So, you should never make a film. It's not a good idea to start with, a film about your grandmother. But I think we've found a way into that story that I'm quite happy with, and I'm quite excited. So hopefully that comes together. And also planning a documentary about the Daigofuku Ryumaru, which is a tuna fishing boat in the Japanese tuna fishing boat in the 1950s that got caught in an American H-bomb test.
Wow.
It's a story that's like, it was the inspiration for Godzilla, but sort of that that nugget, that story behind it has sort of, outside of Japan at least, has sort of has got quite lost in time. So I'm sort of interested in bringing that story to the rest of the world.
It's interesting. Well, we definitely look forward to all of these projects that you have lined up.
Thank you.
And then lastly, where can people watch Idol again if they want to watch or purchase the film?
That's a really good question. Our festival run, we hope, will continue. So follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Maybe Twitter's better. So you can keep an eye out for where we're playing next, and then eventually we'll be releasing the film online, but that likely won't be until next year.
Okay. Well, very exciting. Ryushi, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us about your film. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for all the great questions.
Oh, well, thank you. It's only capitalized by a great filmmaker to interview. So,
well, I don't know about that.
Well, we hope to show many more of your projects in the coming years. So, we look forward to that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Audience, if you'd like to follow Ryushi and get all updates for his upcoming projects, please follow him on his Twitter as well as his other social media handles that's listed below. And this concludes day 10 of Happy Fest. Tomorrow's film block will be Raising a Toast. As part of our closing night lineup, we are proud to end on 2 films submitted by our festival alums. Director of our 2019 selection, My Mother, Myself, and I, King Yao-soon brings another deeply emotional story to the festival called Yellow. In light of a friend's personal experience with anti-Asian discrimination during the pandemic, the story conveys to the audience that even in the face of negativity, there's always a silver lining that raises hope of humanity. Which leads us into our documentary feature, Far East, Deep South. Our journey with the power couple behind this film has spanned as far as 2018, but it wasn't until 2020 that we featured their short, Finding Cleveland, in our festival. Having the opportunity to support Larissa Lamb and Baldwin Chu on their ancestral journey and finally see this short transform into a feature film brings a sense of satisfaction to historians and amateur sleuths alike that if the desire to uncover your family roots is strong enough, the answers are out there to find. Tickets and passes are still available for this last film block, so please go to haapifest.com for more details. Have a great evening.